Welcome. We are going to talk about some of the questions that I get in my school community, and I think this was a fantastic question. It was all about low vitamin D, and I know that this woman was also struggling with low ferritin, and I think that they go hand in hand. And I know ferritin, low ferritin has become like a big buzz thing on social media. And I think a big part of the issue is being missed. A lot of people just think that throwing low lactoferrin at it is going to solve all of their problems, but there is a big difference between optimal health and then just muting signals. And I'll give you an example with that. There was a woman that I was speaking to. She had signed up for offer free 15-minute calls to see whether or not my services are aligned. And she was wanting to work with me because she was struggling with all of these different symptoms like hair loss, fatigue, not feeling like herself, feeling really exhausted, acne, big one, and hormonal imbalances. You have it, you name it, she was struggling with it. So she had said that she had been able to lose 100 pounds, but was still struggling with all these symptoms. And I was like, how did you lose 100 pounds? Because I think the weight loss would have been really hard to do with everything that you're struggling with. And she's like, it was. I had to starve myself, and I was only able to eat one meal a day in order to lose the weight. So I think that our perception of health and wellness, when we are just getting the results that we want, but it's not equating to optimal health. Those are two completely different things. And so, is it possible to improve your ferritin or your vitamin D doing something a different way? Sure. But does that mean that it's actually getting your body closer to optimal health? Does it mean that it's your body healing? Does it mean that you are not just like suppressing a signal, but actually supporting it to heal? I think those are completely different ways of looking at it. So, with that being said, I want to share my screen with you because I want to go through the questions that she was having um, so that you can see how this worked. So, uh, let's do this. I'm gonna see if I can like move myself out of the way here. And all right, well that's fine. Um, maybe one day I'll figure out how to share my screen better. Until then, this is what we're going to do. Okay, so her question was low vitamin D, that her vitamin D came back to 21 or 14, sorry, and she was being, considering taking a vitamin D supplement to help bring it up and wanted to know my thoughts around that. So, with that being said, I think there's a few pieces to it. So we need to get out of the mindset that a low vitamin D or a low iron or a low magnesium or a low copper means that it's low in the whole body, because it's just a reflection of that location where the blood is being taken at that moment in time of blood. And I know that that sounds silly, like I'm dumbing that down, but that seems to be something that's largely lost when we're looking at our overall health and wellness. So, one of my friends, she is a practitioner and she's somebody that I mentor. And we were discussing about the organs having different types of blood that go through them. And I was saying how intuitively it makes sense that, say, for example, the spleen blood is not going to be the same as the heart blood, that they would have different blood that would go through it because. For example, iron can accumulate in different tissues. So it wouldn't make sense to me then that we would have our minerals would be the same all throughout the body. And that it's just like, well, this is just what your minerals are. And so a blanket sweeping, this is how it is, because blood can change and there are different organs that are going to require different minerals, and iron can accumulate in different organs. So therefore, to me, that means that the blood there would change, and energetically it would make sense. And she was saying that they use like a bow and arrow to hunt animals, and they can tell based on the the organ that's been punctured based on the color of blood that comes out. So she was saying that, again, intuitively, it makes sense to her that the blood is not all the same throughout the entire body because you can tell based on the color. And if there's a color change, then that means that, again, I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody who would argue it, but that if there's a color change in your blood, then again, it wouldn't make any sense as to it being the same. And if somebody were to argue that perspective, then my question would be, how do you know that you shouldn't smoke by looking at a package of cigarettes where they have one image of a smoker's lungs aside a non-smoker's lungs? And that's, part of like scaring us to not smoke. Intuitively, we all know that. We just don't think of like the reasoning behind it. And so color has a huge impact on how our body is able to function. And we obviously want our organs to have color to them. And the same goes for blood. So, um, when we are thinking of a vitamin D deficiency, first of all, there's multiple markers that we can use to test vitamin D. I highly suggest looking into the history of vitamin D, why vitamin D became such a big test and such a big buzzword for having markers tested for it. It's not it doesn't come from a place of like genuine concern about people. Somebody that was going around promoting it was also being paid by labs, and yeah, there's quite the history around that. So when we are looking at vitamin D, there is an active and there's an inactive form, and so we can test the inactive, which is typically what's tested, but it doesn't mean that the active form is within balance from the inactive. And it's really important to look at the two of them together to kind of piece together what's going on in the body. Um, I was aware from her having asked a previous question, and so I can't remember if I said it, but this is so in my school community, which you'll see the link below for, um, my clients get to ask me questions, and then I get to answer with thoughtful responses. And one of her questions was about vitamin D, but I know that she had previously asked a question about ferritin. And so it's making me think of, is her body processing? Is it recycling things optimally? Is she digesting things? What's the status of her gallbladder and her liver? I have a whole bunch of different thoughts going through my head with it not just being like low ferritin, but also something else instead. So magnesium has a role in converting the storage or the inactive form of vitamin D to the active. I want you to think about, um, I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say here, but I want you to think about, so it's 2026. I want you to think about 6 years ago. And I want you to think about the big toilet paper epidemic that went on where people were buying toilet paper in droves. Having all of that toilet paper, aside from logically it not making any sense at all, does not solve our issue of when we are on the toilet and we then need said toilet paper. Because that toilet paper, if we think of having like a huge storage room full of it, it's all in the storage room. And so we still need somebody to go down to the storage room and take that roll and bring it up to the bathroom. Part of the issue is that it's costly to have, that huge amount being stored. And think of that like your liver, where we don't need this copious amount of vitamin D that's being stored. Think of it like your toilet paper. We just need a small amount of it so that we can dip into it and we can convert it into the active form. And so magnesium's role is it's that basically that person that goes down to the storage room, grabs it, and then brings it up so that it can be activated. And so one of the questions one of the suggestions that I gave her is consider Caliphos. Caliphos is a cell salt. It can help with anxiety. It can help with sleeplessness and digestive problems. And it can also help with the potassium receptors. So a lot of people will think that they're low ferritin, they're low iron, that it has to do with low iron in the body. And I've already given you my spiel about blood and how it's really not, the bee's knees like we think that it is. We have to acknowledge that there are flaws with it. Can it be helpful? Yes, but does it mean that it goes without flaws? No. And we have to understand what those flaws are because, also the markers don't mean a whole lot unless we have somebody that we can lean on to interpret those markers. It's basically like a different language. So some person, I can guarantee that I would look at blood markers differently than, say, a doctor would. I'm not diagnosing anything. I'm looking at where the body is handling stress. How is it handling stress? What does this look like for you? It's really a small amount of impact that's put into the blood markers, whereas typically that's going to be really heavily relied upon, and it's going to be like, well, if vitamin D is low, then you take more vitamin D, just like what this question is. And that's not how I look at things at all. It's kind of like a symphony, or if you think of like those old clocks where they have the gears in them, if you take one of those things out of it, the whole clock is not going to function optimally. It's not going to function the same. There is a part of it that is missing, and so to think, well, we just need more of said item doesn't actually help get things going. And so Caliphos as a cell salt can be really helpful. It's a really inexpensive supplement, and it can be really helpful for helping with stress, because I think that a lot of this just comes down to a lot of stress that's built up in the body. So next up is cod liver oil. Since her question asked about cod liver oil, I wanted to make sure that I addressed it. And it does have vitamin D that's naturally occurring in it. The goat is always going to be getting out in the sun, getting some sunshine on our retinas, because we need retinol. And there is this connection here with the eyes. The eyes are the gateway to the soul. There's a spiritual component to it as well. The sun is very healing, and there is ebbs and flows. So I also want to point out that just as the tide goes in and the tide goes out, and we have night and we have day, there is this yin and a yang relationship that we need to have with our body as well. So we are not designed to just be exposed to vitamin D 24/7. We are meant to have ebbs and flows. And just like our storage of vitamin D is meant to dip down, um, because in the winter time, think of like the thing that really confuses me is if you think of Aboriginal people who were living in northern Canada for thousands and thousands of years, they did not need vitamin D supplements. Like, how did they live up there where, they're not going to be outside in -40 and exposed to these long periods of very cold weather for a significant period of time? Their bodies would have stored it, and then they would have used it when it needed it. And that's a really important distinction as well, is there's ebbs and flows, and we need to understand that. So when we are thinking of like how is the body handling its stress? Is our body able to actually process vitamin A effectively? Is it able to process fats effectively? So, for example, when I think of Hashimoto's, I am thinking of whether or not we are able to get enough retinol into our body, and there's also an emotional component to it as well. Through and through, when we are talking about autoimmune, the emotional component comes first and foremost. And then after the energetics has been addressed, then we can start looking at minerals. But autoimmune priority is energetics. And so and it can have a lot to do with a vitamin A. And vitamin A and vitamin D go hand in hand together. Think of where they are occurring naturally together. They are going to be there, with the exception being mushrooms, where vitamin D can be there and retinol isn't going to be. But when we are talking about lard and tallow and animal fats and cod liver oil and beef liver, there's going to be vitamin A and vitamin D that are naturally occurring together. And so, whether or not her body is actually able to process that effectively because of the stress has, a big piece in that. And so I think that that's really important too. So just taking more cod liver oil doesn't necessarily mean that we are then going to improve our vitamin D. I would think that a liver and a gallbladder flush would be a really important thing to consider here to help make sure that we aren't having stones that are being trapped inside of us. You'd probably be surprised at the stones that would come out of you. I know I was shocked with the amount of stones that my body has released, and it really makes me wonder, because I eat very clean and I have a really great diet. Not to say that like I eat perfect all the time, I'm human. But I definitely think that I'm eating a lot better than some, and even my supplements. So Probably be really surprised. Okay, so that kind of tied into where I was going to with the stress in the body. So there's this HPA axis, and it can have to an impact like bone marrow, it can impact iron absorption, it can involve inflammation. And so with the ferritin being below 20 and a vitamin D being below 21, it was kind of making me think, I think that this is more of a stress response on the body rather than an issue of consuming more of those minerals. So, for example, I was thinking that the Califos could help with reducing the stress, and that adrenal cocktails could help with the stress of the adrenal glands to try and see if we can help get the body back online to support it to heal. Because at the end of the day, if we aren't adding in different factors like this, then just taking, what somebody would typically be told, just take more iron, that's a heavy metal. So even, and if you've watched my videos, I talk about how we need more bioavailable copper. You'll see here, I'm not recommending her to take copper. There is a process that we need to go through first so that the body can function optimally. And so flowers can be really grounding. Herbs, lavender, you can get in capsules, and that can be really supportive for helping us with stress. So next up was Epsom salts as a bath. So that way we are not just consuming more supplements because our body's already having a hard time with digesting effectively. So we can do it topically. We can get sprays. We can take Epsom salt baths, super inexpensive. You could do an Epsom salt soak and do it in front of the TV and sit there, and that can be a really great way about going around it. Okay, so those were the four suggestions that I made her. Um, oh, this was from our call the other day. So I also help my clients with fat loss, and these were actually my results. I have a program in the community, and these were the transformations that I had over the last couple months, which is mind blowing. Remember what I can't even remember who I was in the top left-hand corner. So, and that was postpartum period. So just so we're all aware, that didn't just happen overnight. That was a buildup over time, and a lot of that had to do with stress. So, yeah, we won't get into the fat loss side of things right now, but when we are talking about vitamin D, when we are talking about low ferritin, there is more to it than just taking more of something that we are low in. And we also need to understand, and part of the issue is because we have providers who don't understand this because it's not what they're taught. They aren't taught this. So when we are going to our provider and we are saying, like, I feel off, I want some markers run, and then they run the markers, and it's like, well, you're low in these things, test, don't guess. Well, like, what does that even mean at the end of the day? Because it comes down to who is interpreting the results for how they are going to look at something and whether or not that person aligns with you. And that's really important to understand, that you don't have to be the person to know all of these different things. You don't have to be the person who like is trying to piece together all of these different things. You are allowed to ask for help, and you can ask for support, and that's where I come in. So if you found it helpful today, if you found that interesting, I highly recommend joining my school community. Right now, you can join it for it's $7 a month, which is just like insane that it's that affordable. And you can be able to ask me some questions. So, if that sounds like a no-brainer to you, then come in and join me. There's obviously different tiers, there's different options, there's different videos, there's different content, there's exclusive content in there that you won't find anywhere else. And I am really excited to helping you. So, um, yeah, I will see you over there, and if not, I'll see you on here in about a week's time.